It is Saturday, January 10th, and welcome to 2026 in this edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. You know, I must tell you that we must grieve for Renee Good, who died in Minnesota this week. Her life had value, and her death is irreversible. Even if her actions escalated the encounter, death is not something any of us should easily dismiss, justify casually, or reduce to political talking points. Compassion for her and her loved ones is not optional. It is absolutely essential. At the same time, honesty demands we acknowledge the reality faced by law enforcement officers, whether they're ICE, the FBI, sheriffs, Capitol Hill police, local police. We must recognize the reality of what they face every day. They do not experience events the way we do from behind the screens. They cannot pause, rewind, or simply analyze angles frame by frame. They must interpret intent, danger, and consequence in real time, under stress, with incomplete information, and with their own lives and the lives of their fellow comrades at stake. The legal and moral standard is not whether, in hindsight, the officer could have survived without firing, because he could have. And that kill shot broke my heart. It did, as it broke yours. But the question is whether a reasonable person in that position would have believed their life or the lives of others was imminent danger. Standing in front of a vehicle that suddenly accelerates, you're not calmly weighing ethical theories. You're reacting to what feels like a split-second threat to your survival. That does not make the outcome less tragic. It makes it so more human. Two truths can exist at once. A woman, Renee Good, made a decision that dramatically escalated a very volatile situation. And an ICE officer made a decision under extreme pressure that resulted in the irreversible loss of Renee's life. Neither truth erases the other. Sam Faddis, one of my favorites, the editor of his magazine, is joining us today, along with Michael Yarn, author, analyst, a war correspondent. And you know, Sam, I lost track there for a minute. You're the editor of A&D magazine, but I want to get your thoughts on what happened in Minnesota.
Well, thanks for having me, Armstrong. Look, I obviously agree with your sentiment, right? I mean, this is why we ought to think very carefully about our actions, because human life has value, and there are real consequences, and people die, and it's not a movie, and it's horrible. But look, there's no question when you are driving a 2-ton motor vehicle and you decide to attempt to take that vehicle through and potentially over law enforcement officers, that thing is a weapon, and you are now posing a mortal threat to the life of that law enforcement officer, and there's no question that they are justified in defending themselves and stopping that threat to themselves and other officers in the street. The people that I think really need to be sobered by this, and unfortunately I don't have any confidence they will be, are the people around the country who are constantly ramping up the rhetoric and talking about law enforcement officers as the Gestapo and Nazis, and encouraging people to go out and fight them and confront them in the street. I mean, our man Mamdani, the new mayor of New York City, his head of the Office of Tenant Relations, or whatever the exact title is, who's been in the news the last several days because of a whole bunch of old tweets of hers that have surfaced. I mean, this is a lady holding a position in a major office, the largest city in the country, who says explicitly, word for word, that the police are tools of the regime that get paid to commit murder. And that's the kind of rhetoric that's being pumped out all across the country. And my real fear is not just that this, obviously it's tragic this lady's dead, but that you're going to see this kind of thing escalate. You're going to see a lot more people dead, because what they're saying to folks is you should literally be physically confronting and fighting law enforcement in the street, and that's going to lead to these kind of results.
So let me talk to Michael Yon here a minute. I was talking to Juanita and Adine as we were preparing for the broadcast, and I said to them, Michael, no matter what you think about the outcome, one thing that was important in the Williams household when we were growing up was the respect for authority. I did not always like my parents' authority, but I had to respect it. Those were the rules that we had to follow. The other thing they taught us is that even for law enforcement, if there's a traffic stop, if there's something going on, if law enforcement stops you, it doesn't matter to them whether they're right or wrong, you must comply. Compliance is important. And then if you feel that you've been wrong, then take it to the courts or somewhere else. But you cannot fight in that moment when it's intense, it's volatile, and everybody's reacting. So someone has to de-escalate the situation. So I've always been taught to comply. And when Nita was telling the story how she was going through TSA, they confiscated her phone, she had an attitude, but you know what she said? She was humble enough to say, you know what? I'll fight this another day. I just want to get through security, get on my airline. What has happened to that attitude and that demeanor, Michael, in this conversation?
Right. Well, first of all, I've only seen 3 videos of what happened, and none of those contain actual context. And that's obviously, we all know that first reports are always wrong. So, and I have only seen, again, 3 videos without context. I don't even know what happened. I know she's dead, and I know there was a shooting. I saw that, right? But in any case, having spent years in combat where many people were getting killed on a frequent basis, one thing that I wrote and said on interviews many times is if you're ever at a traffic stop or if you're at a checkpoint, that's where you can get killed. It happened all the time, right? And it happened when 2 people misunderstand each other. One's in the car behind the wheel and one's got a weapon, right? It happened all the time. It happened in Iraq all the time. It happened in Afghanistan all the time. Often it was the ANA, the Afghan National Army, shooting people. Sometimes it was our guys. Our guys were much better at it. It was more uncommon for our guys to make a mistake. It happened, though. And it happened in Iraq from time to time, but the Iraqi army did it all the time. And again, it's 2 people misunderstanding each other, or they both have decided to do battle with their respective weapons, and somebody wins and somebody loses. And so I don't know what happened in this case. I know that we all can see that it's being used as a weapon in and of itself to divide our country. And so this is the time when calm voices like I see with you and Sam are absolutely vital. The calm voices to slow down and let this absorb before we jump out on the street and actually do something.
Sam, what is it that people often misunderstand? It's fascinating how Michael just explained what happens at security checkpoints, how people die for no reason at all. What is it that people often misunderstand about how law enforcement officers experience these encounters in real time, and how different is decision-making under stress compared to reviewing events later on video or some social media?
Yeah, well, it's night and day. I mean, as Michael knows as well or better than anybody, I mean, look, you are in the moment and things are happening frame by frame, literally in fractions of a second, and you're operating with incomplete information And nobody, by the way, gave you a warning and said, hey, this is going to be a test. You're going about your life and dealing with the stress and how much sleep you've had and 9 million other factors. And then boom, you are face to face with a sequence of events literally unfolding in fractions of a second. And you're going to try to process that and make a decision and take an action that you're then going to have to stand by for the rest of your life.
Let me interrupt you a minute, because I know we're going to break in about 2 minutes. You know, much of this stems from Trump's ICE policies in these cities where people have become hardened, where dark money has used people to protest and defy, to push back. And what has happened is on both sides have become volatile encounters, because both sides have hardened attitudes toward law enforcement. Law enforcement has a hardened attitude toward the protesters in these everyday actions. And so this is only escalating. But people have to realize, oftentimes they don't realize, Sam, they're being used as a pawn, and they could actually die. I mean, that kill shot was so devastating, I must tell you. I said to myself, she didn't have to die that way. But still, the feelings are so hardened about the continued escalation of what ICE does in these different cities.
Yeah, well, you got to understand, Armstrong, I mean, for instance, when you go through counterterrorist training and you're dealing with how to respond at checkpoints like Michael was making reference to, or ambushes and so forth, and I'm talking from my standpoint as an intelligence officer, I may be armed. What's the number one thing they tell you? The number one weapon you are in possession of as you sit there at that checkpoint or you're in the ambush is that 2-ton motor vehicle that can drive 120 miles an hour. So before you decide to go all James Bond and rolling out of a vehicle, understand you have the capacity to run over people and kill them. I'm talking about training our guys to survive. So when this lady steps on the gas in a vehicle, and I have no doubt that she, in her mind, believed she was doing the right thing. She steps on the gas. This is not like, hey, this may knock this guy over or he may fall down. No, this is an absolutely mortal threat to the life of a law enforcement officer. You're trying to kill me, lady, with a big machine that weighs 2 tons and will crush me. There is no question. And from a legal standpoint, there's no question. Now, I'm not pretending that I've reviewed every angle of all the video. I'm just saying that's the reality. You're not talking about brushing somebody out of the way. You're talking about going over top of them and murdering them. And again, the number one group of people I blame for this are the folks who are pumping out this rhetoric, telling people like this woman that you are doing the right thing to go out in the street and confront law enforcement officers. They're the Gestapo, they're Nazis. You're doing the right thing. You're fighting for America, truth, and justice. And they don't care that she's dead. In fact, they will now use her death to pour more fuel on the fire.
And we'll be back. Now, Michael Jan, you're in the Netherlands. Tell us about why you're there, and also what connects rising domestic tension with instability we see in other parts of the world, and you can start from where you are.
Right. I'm in Netherlands. I'm with my wife, and we have been staying with Catherine Austin Fitts for more than a month now, studying together, actually. And, Netherlands is often a place I come to, or my wife Masako and I come to after we leave places like Panama or other countries, because this is vital terrain, which Sam will be very familiar with. Netherlands is if you want to dominate Europe, you're going to want to take out Germany, and you're going to want to dominate Netherlands. And that's why we're here. We spend a lot of time here over the years. And so what are we learning? Routes and resources and ideology are the principal reasons for conflict, right? And often ideology boils down to routes and resources. And so what we're seeing is global fights. We're often in other places like Japan, Taiwan, Thailand, and because they're all part of this larger war that's going on. For instance, the war using weaponized migration, if you want to call it migration, this is an old war game, by the way. It's not anything new. It was old before our great-grandparents were born, right? This has been going on for many centuries. You should see our library. Our personal library in Japan has massive sections on this sort of warfare: demographic warfare, anthropological warfare, psychological warfare, right? The most intense form of warfare is information war, and a subset of that is psychological operations. And the grease and fuel of psychological operations is intoxicants. The main way we took out the Indians was firewater, right? It was not even rifles. It was removing them from their land, diminishing their minds with whiskey and that sort of thing. So this is an old game plan. When you go down the streets of Washington, D.C. or Amsterdam here, or in San Francisco, many countries I go to now, the smell of dope is everywhere. You can see the collective IQ is being diminished. You can see that you can feel it, right? And I spend most of my time downrange. I spend most of my time actually outside of the United States, about more than 20 years in Asia, all across this place. When I come back to the United States and I come to my country, and I can see it. I can see the collective IQ is diminishing, and you can see that emotional behavior, just over the top, radical, constantly. That is part of the same weapon system that's unfolding. The use of intoxicants, whether that be alcohol or cannabis or prescription drugs, these are clearly used as weapons, and it's very open. There's nothing hidden about it. It's unfolding here, Argentina, Thailand, everywhere I go.
Wow. Sam, here's what we'd like for you to do for us. And I want you to take your time and do it in the methodical way that you're known for. Take us back to Venezuela, Maduro and his wife Cecilia, the fact that they were deposed. Almost 75 of their guards were killed, and not one American lost their life. And the thing about successes, and that was a success for President Trump, it should bring about humility, but we found no humility in the president. He's become even more ratchet up his rhetoric, his aggressiveness, talking about going to Greenland, talking about Cuba, talking about Colombia. And I just want you to just take the air out of this room and explain to us what is realistic, what is his ambition, because so many people around the world are confused. You would not believe the number of texts and the calls I get from people saying, what is going on, what is happening? Explain to us what is going on here, Sam.
Well, I'm going to try to process, first of all, the fact that you think I take the air out of the room, Armstrong. I'm not sure that's a compliment, but look, Maduro.
Okay.
I understand your point.
I know.
Maduro's a scumbag, and he's guilty of everything he's charged with, and about 9 million other things. And if there's a God in heaven, he will be convicted and spend the rest of his life in prison. Okay, fine. That is a good thing, a very good thing. The operation was brilliantly executed, nothing but respect, as always, for the men and women in the U.S. military and their capacity to carry this out and get in and out in the way that they did, and I'm glad that they all got out safe. Okay. When every conversation I've had since this happened, since the first moment it happened, my question is, so what's next? What's the plan? What happens now? And this obviously is the point of concern. Maduro's gone. The regime is not gone. Whatever terminology you want to use, the cabal, the cartel, It remains in place. The acting president is his former vice president. She's all part of this and has been for a long time. And every other key player in the regime is in place, and probably the most important guy there is the interior minister, who runs the whole horrible machine that, if you open your mouth and say the wrong thing, either beats the hell out of you in the street or worse, drags you away, and then you may never be seen again. I mean, none of that has changed, and occasionally there are some brief references, things that are said that suggest some degree of moderation on the part of this regime in the sense of selling oil or something like that. But I have yet to see the slightest indication that they're going to change anything they do internally in Venezuela. And in fact, everything they have done tells you they are signaling very, very loudly to everybody in Venezuela, shut the hell up and stay in line, because Maduro's gone, but nothing else has changed. I mean, literally to the point of issuing a formal decree saying, if we catch you celebrating the American operation, you're going away. So then the question becomes, what next? And I know Michael has this concern. Okay, are we now going to go down a road of, okay, well, that didn't achieve the ultimate results, so we will ratchet this up step by step by step, kind of reflexively, and then the next thing you know, we will be where we have been before, where all of a sudden we are involved in a much bigger thing. And I would just add, for the moment, everybody celebrates when you pull off an op like this and nobody gets hurt, and it kind of looks like a video game. The first helicopter that goes down and a bunch of guys are dead, or worse from a political standpoint, are being paraded in front of cameras somewhere, all of a sudden, we all know, everybody who thought this was neat will be like, what the hell are we doing, man? Why, how did we get here? So I hope that we have thought this through and that we have a plan, because after Iraq and Afghanistan, you got to think, man, I hope to God we are not going to get sucked into something like that again.
And what about Cuba, Greenland, Colombia, these other places?
I don't know why we are suggesting we're going to go to war with Colombia. I don't know why we are opening the door to military action against Greenland. I'm not quite sure why we think we need Greenland. I mean, the idea of defense, well, we've had American military installations in Greenland forever, and it's a territory of Denmark, and Denmark is part of NATO, so it's not like it's hostile territory. I think you know me well enough to know my attitude toward this. This is a time for calm words, sober thought, careful deliberation. This is not shoot from the hip time, because once it's not a game, you can't reset it and go. We had 5 months into the Afghan campaign, when bin Laden went across the border into Pakistan, I think we had max 402 guys on the ground in Afghanistan. Most brilliant operation since World War II. The next thing you know, we're spending 20 years in Afghanistan trying to teach them to raise Italian goats and treat their women according to Western standards. And, how did we go from that to just step by step by step sucked in and this open-ended commitment? I hope to God that is not where we are headed with this. We need to be very, very careful.
Michael?
Well, I mean, we're looking at a global war. That's why Masako and I are constantly traveling the world, going to the key places like Thailand. Trump
who's looking for a global war?
It's on. It's on, Armstrong. Nobody's looking for it. It's game on. You're in the middle of it. For instance, the death jabs were one of the components of many, right? Food, for instance, here in Netherlands, the farmers are being knocked off of their fields just like they are in Canada and England and Australia, right? And Texas as well, right? And so all these places, we're constantly there watching. The United Nations is still ready to flood our borders with with invaders, which is happening right now still in Europe, right? And so at the end of the day, there's so many weapons that are being deployed and employed in combat. I mean, Masako, my wife, she's sitting on the couch here, actually. She's good friends with a Japanese doctor named Yasufumi Murakami. He's the scientist who actually, and his team, pulled together those tens of millions of records and found that at least 600,000 Japanese alone have died from the death jabs. Last time we had dinner with him a few months ago in Japan, we talked about this for hours. I mean, more than 600,000 Japanese dead from those jabs, right?
So when you speak of global war, you're not talking about in the context of the conversation I'm having with Sam. You're talking about in the context of not firing a weapon.
Part of it is most of warfare is actually doesn't involve hot war. Most of it's information war. Most of it's financial. It's banking. It's all kinds of other things besides actually shooting. The kinetics part is just actually, and sometimes it's just a small component. Most of the warfare is happening with things like drugs, draining us dry with the drugs. This is an old game as well. There's nothing new about this.
You know, Sam, as someone with the former with the CIA, do you agree wholeheartedly with what Michael is saying?
CIA is the one that did it. Sam, come on. They're the experts.
Well, now he's making me feel like I got to plead the fifth, Armstrong. No, look, I think we are dealing. I mean, Michael and I are good friends, and we agree on some things, and we don't agree on everything. I'm not sure that I connect all of the dots here and think we are facing, a coordinated assault. I believe all of these are issues. So we're talking about drugs, for instance. Back to the issue about Venezuela and this kind of thing. One of the big concerns of people is we elected America First president, and I thought that he was going to focus first and foremost on addressing issues internally in the country. And now all of a sudden we're attacking Venezuela, potentially talking about attacking Colombia. We're talking about seizing Greenland. I can walk down to I can go down to the Kensington neighborhood in Philadelphia and then walk along the street and see hundreds of people completely zombified by fentanyl and other drugs, xylazine, and nothing has changed there. So I understand those concerns.
When we come back, we're going to be joined by others to continue this conversation with Sam and Michael. I'm Armstrong Williams. It's a provocative conversation today, and we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. And welcome back. We're now joined by Karys Rhea, a writer and fellow with the Middle East Forum. We welcome you back to the broadcast. It seems as though Trump has been in office for 10 years and not less than 11 months. I mean, of all the things that are going on in the world today with Maduro and Venezuela and the threats against other countries, what will stop China from its threat on Taiwan? And people forget, Taiwan defeated China before, okay? And beat them pretty badly. And you know, in their minds, they can never forget that. And then there's these threats online where Russia's threatening missiles towards America. We don't know whether that's true or not, because when you shut down Venezuela, you shut down a major source of oil. And Iran is collapsing, literally collapsing before our eyes, where the Ayatollah is saying, we'll pay you guys $7 a month to put you in your place. The world is collapsing.
I don't know if I would say collapsing. I think there's some very good things happening and some very bad things happening, just depending on the region or the country. I think that Trump's doctrine of peace through strength, as long as it can be implemented in action, is really the way to go, which is essentially the middle way between non-interventionism of the libertarians or the paleos and strong interventionism of the neocons. Peace through strength means carrying a big stick, letting your enemies know that they should fear us, because if they try one thing, we are going to go in heavy and we are going to be hard, and they will wish that they had not screwed around with us. But on the other hand, being much more wary and vigilant about where we send our troops, where we put our taxpayer dollars, and the foreign entanglements that have really drained a lot of our resources and bloated our military-industrial complex. This is why empowering allies that have the same values and interests and share our enemies in certain regions is really the way to go, like Israel, for example, or like Argentina in South America. Because if you can rely on your allies to essentially take care of their own regions, then you can really focus on our biggest number one threat, which, as you mentioned, was China. And we can really devote the majority of our resources to the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, but our allies, from Macron all across the Europe, with the exception of maybe Sturmer, and even in Germany, who've remained quiet on Trump's deposing Maduro, are outraged. They think this is going to lead to the dismantling of NATO.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when I say allies, I'm talking about real allies,
Who are real
not
allies?
paying lip service. I think, well, it depends on the region. If
in Europe?
In Europe, that's a great question. I think that we have levels of allies. So is Europe an ally? Absolutely. But are they a reliable ally? That's another question. And I think we have to go country by country. I think that Eastern European countries that are facing that, or have faced in the past, a real threat of communism, and also have taken it upon themselves to enact very strict migration policies because they see what has happened in Western Europe with the influx of the Islamic migrants. I think those are countries that we could be working with and actually pooling our resources and sharing intelligence with. And then, Taiwan obviously is an ally. Israel is an ally. Increasingly, Abraham Accord countries are allies, like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, Argentina, El Salvador more and more. And then you have a lot of countries that people don't even talk about that are even thinking about, joining the Abraham Accords, like Kazakhstan and Indonesia. Trump is really, really remarkable at getting these people to the table and essentially committing to a pro-America, pro-Western doctrine.
How do you think Cuba, if Cubans were listening to this conversation, what you're saying, how do you think Cubans feel as though America is going to invade and take over? And when you talk about that big stick, do you mean that big stick? We should take over Cuba? Should we take over Greenland? I just asked Sam about how big should that stick be?
I don't think we should take over Greenland. I think we should purchase Greenland. That's an absolutely vital.
But what if they don't want to sell?
If they don't want to sell, then they don't want to sell, and we can't do anything about it. But I think Trump's gonna give them the proper incentives to get them to want to sell. So of course we should purchase Greenland. Why not? That is. Do you know that Denmark has not done a single thing? Denmark and Canada have not done a single thing to police those waterways. Talk about our enemies. Talk about Russia. Talk about China. Talk about Iran. Talk about North Korea. That is a vital strategic stronghold in terms of where our national security interests lie.
Let me get Sam to respond to it, because I see a smile on your face, Sam. Knock yourself out. Go have at it.
Well, the smile was on my face because I had this sinking feeling you were going to ask me to respond.
Yes, of course.
The smile was there. Look, I'm not if we're talking about Greenland, I'm not disputing there are a variety of reasons why Greenland is of strategic importance to us. It is not the case that we are not present. We've been present. We've had installations there since the Second World War. And Denmark is part of NATO, and Canada is part of NATO. And there's nothing that stops us from militarily expanding that presence with the consent of the Canadians and the Danes. And I'm not necessarily philosophically hard over and opposed to us purchasing Greenland if the people that live in Greenland, who we ought to mention along the way, actually want that. And we shouldn't just negotiate between us and Copenhagen and buy these people. I just don't understand, to begin with, why we have even put out in the public discourse the idea that we are not ruling out military action against territory that is the territory of a NATO member. So we are leaving out there in this possibility that we might attack a fellow NATO country is what that boils down to legally. I would have thought that the response to that would have been, of course we're not going to invade Greenland. That's not on the table. I don't know why we've left that out there. And maybe more to the point, I don't understand why that has become a central issue. And to shift gears here to sort of domestic politics, since I spend a lot of time in the grassroots movement in Pennsylvania, I think a lot of the people that put Trump in office don't understand that. They expect a long list of other things, and Greenland was nowhere on that list of things that they were interested in.
I mean, that's not my understanding. I mean, here in D.C., Greenland has been on the radar of certain Trump appointees and also just people in Washington in the conservative movement here for quite a long time. And it's been a subject of conversation, you know, in many working groups and, you know, D.C. events and what have you. But I don't know why it's necessary to essentially assure our enemies that we are going to do anything that could possibly embolden them. I think it's very, very, and no, I'm not talking about, you know, Denmark and Europe, but I am talking about the enemies that are looking, you know, Russia, China, Iran, that are looking to us to see what we are going to say, what we are going to do. And if there's any indication that we are going to go soft on them, you know, I mean, that only emboldens them. Look at, I mean, Trump is amazing at this. He's erratic. He stays silent on certain things deliberately to make our enemies confused about which way we will go. And we can see the practical effect of that just the other day when you have a Russian oil tanker that is being monitored by a submarine, maybe a nuclear submarine, I'm not sure. And can you imagine the balls of Donald Trump to send in our ships to seize that tanker? And what did Russia do? What did they do? Not a single thing. They had a submarine monitoring that tanker, and they didn't do anything. And that just shows the
some
power.
Of our businesses in Ukraine. Some rockets hit some of our businesses in Ukraine, right? American interests got attacked in Ukraine. So, I mean, they did do something. This is Russia. They're not children, and they're not cowards. These are very serious people. They're very intelligent. We have to take them seriously. The Chinese as well. I've been all over China, right? These are very serious people. You're not going to just come push these people around. China is filling up the bathtub. I'm in Panama all the time. They're slowly taking Panama. Trump makes it sound like that we're taking the Panama Canal. We're not. China is slowly taking the Panama Canal. They're doing it demographically. They're doing it politically. They're building a fourth bridge right now. I'm there all the time. They're building 2 bridges down the Darien Gap. I'm the one that actually found them. So, I mean, I take my team down there all the time. We need very serious analysts. This is not rah-rah time. China is a very serious opponent, to put it mildly, that they can take, if they take Taiwan, they have to go for Okinawa, right? They're doing a tremendous information war to take Okinawa from Japan. I've written 3 books about this. They're only in Japanese. They're not even in English, because I've been working for years to wake up the Japanese to this, right? This is very serious. Anyway, I could go on for hours.
No, just hold on. Let me take a break. Let me take a break, and we'll come back. I'm Armstrong Williams.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
So, Rhea, I guess Chile, Nicaragua, Cuba, all these countries should be concerned. And when I say concerned, because what happened to Maduro can certainly happen to them.
Absolutely, they should be concerned, because these are countries that have allowed in the foreign influence of China, Russia, and Iran to work against America right in our borders. Our enemies know that the closer that they can get to us, the more of a chance they have of destabilizing us. Michael Yon understands that better than anybody, being on the ground right at our border. So when you have Iran sending Hezbollah agents through our southern border, and you have China sending their agents through our border, and you have Maduro shipping people from his jails to our border, you understand that what's at stake here is much more than oil or even drugs. I mean, we are talking about
the stability of America.
Exactly. We are talking about our national security. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, as I told you during the break, Chile and Nicaragua and Colombia and Cuba, they can elect all of the socialist dictators they want. They do that, they do their thing. That's fine. But if they have foreign agents working against us, then they absolutely should be on watch, because that is not something that America could tolerate. And good on President Trump for finally implementing the Monroe Doctrine and focusing on the Western Hemisphere, because for decades we have just allowed this infiltration below our southern border of all of these Central American and South American countries by our enemies. And Republican and Democrat, you name it, not one single president in decades has paid attention to how crucial this region is and how much we should be paying attention to.
So, Michael, she alluded that you're on the ground and you understand this better than anyone. How do you respond?
Well, I've had my team down in Panama since Biden was installed. I've had them down there for a year, right? Watching this in the Darien Gap and in Colombia and many other countries, but specifically Panama for a year. Watching how China is slowly taking Panama, keeping in mind that's the most important sea route for the United States, right there, Panama Canal. And keep in mind all the partners around there, the neighboring country. Let's talk about who's actually doing these invasions, by the way. These aren't happening because of the Mexican cartels. There's one group, as an example, HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, brags that they brought more than 100,000 Venezuelans out of Venezuela to the United States. It's on their website, HIAS.org, right? I used to eat breakfast with HIAS down in the Darien Gap. So they have offices in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Costa Rica, United States, Mexico, and all over Europe and Africa and Middle East, right? They're taking people out of target areas and putting them into target areas, right? They're not the only ones. Catholic Charities is another one. IOM, there's hundreds actually, but some of the main ones are Catholic Charities. IOM is the main engine, International Organization for Migration. That's the big players, but HIAS is a big one too. So it's not just the things that we see in the news are inconsistent with what I see on the ground. China is not invincible. They're not omniscient, but they are smart and they are tough and they are growing, but they're only growing because we left a vacuum. The Panamanians say that constantly. Why did you leave us? That's why China's here.
Sam, I mean, this is a cause for concern.
Well, look, to the extent what we're talking about is the necessity for the United States to push back forcefully on a whole bunch of foreign adversaries, I'm all in, okay? Without question, we've allowed the Chinese to get away with murder. We've talked a lot of smack about the Iranians and Hezbollah and so forth, and yet we have not been willing to take decisive action against them. So I'm all for that. I am all for making very clear that we're not going to do this. We're not going to just sit here and watch America slide into decline and allow you guys to walk all over us. If there's a note of caution, it is simply, essentially, what is the plan? And exactly have we thought this through? Because our track record on foreign entanglements is not good. Again, we went into Afghanistan with a very clear objective and a very small group of guys, and we achieved total victory in terms of our initial objectives in a remarkably short period of time. And the next thing you know, it's 20 years later, and we're trying to teach the Afghans how to grow Italian goats and bring them from the 12th century into the 21st century. That happened for real, and we walked a similar path in Iraq. So that's my note of caution. It has nothing to do with pushing back on the Iranians, Hezbollah, guys that I worked against for decades in the field, or the Chinese. It's just, okay, this involves a lot more than just grabbing Maduro, which I'm all for. But that didn't change the situation in Venezuela. And what are you prepared to do now? When the Venezuelans don't change course and double down, then what is the next step, and where does that end? How are we going to achieve it? Because that's the way national security has to be conducted, not reflexively, step by step. It's got to be thought out in advance. When they don't do what we want, what are we going to do next? And when that doesn't work, what are we going to do after that, and how far are we going down this road? That's all I'm saying.
You know, Rhea, you've got to explain to our audience Catholic Charities. Because when we hear Catholic Charities, it's something we're supposed to feel good about, give money to. They work for the best interests of people in poverty and in need. But you and Michael are indicating something else today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Michael Yon is much more qualified than me to speak on the Catholic Charities that are pushing this unrestrained migration.
Could you explain Catholic Charities, the Catholic charities that we're unaware of, Michael Yon?
Oh, yeah, they have websites. The Vatican's all behind them. You know, they have offices down in Mexico. I've been to one of their places down there in Mexico. They have them in various places in Texas. That's one of, I have not seen them in Panama, actually. In Panama, it's more IOM, Doctors Without Morals. HIAS is big. Actually, HIAS is the main engine down in the Darien is IOM and HIAS. HIAS has I almost leased their office space that they got before I got it, right beside one of the camps. The camp is called San Vicente Camp. It's near Metatí in the Darien province of Panama. That's about 40 meters away from the front gate of what I call China Camp. I call it China Camp. I've written about it a lot and talked about it.
Explain in layman's term how they threaten the interests of the United States. That's what
flooding us with millions of people, including Iranians. Keep in mind, Iranians are coming through Venezuela, and they get on arrival, Iranians can get Venezuelan passports. HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, has a presence in Venezuela where they help them then get to Colombia, where HIAS helps them get through the Darien Gap, where I then see them coming, and HIAS helps them right on up. They give them maps. I have all their maps, right? I mean, we have all their materials. So they actually are one of the main, and then once they get up to Mexico, Catholic Charities is a bigger player up there and in Texas. So there's different ecosystems where people are doing different things. IOM is a constant in all these ecosystems. IOM, my wife Masako and I, we walked down into the IOM office last year, or December or so of 2024, asking for a job at the IOM office in Buenos Aires. And actually they weren't hiring because Trump had just been elected. He was not inaugurated yet, but we actually walked in asking for a job. Their office was hidden, but we found it. And again, International Organization for Migration. That's the main engine of the invasion.
Michael, hold that. Let me get your final thoughts. Let me start with you, Rhea. There's something that we may not even discuss that we should be aware of.
Well, I think when we're talking about flooding our country with millions of migrants, you have to understand the practical results of that, which is not just how much it actually hurts the minorities in our country, but how much it harms children, as it leads to an unbelievable amount of sex trafficking, human trafficking, child labor, slave labor. It invites in the cartels to our country. I mean, it just has unbelievably horrific knockdown effects for the average American and just for people who have been victims of these, these type of criminals across our border. And I'd just like to respond to the earlier comment. With all due respect, I too share a concern and a fear of nation building and that type of interventionism, but I do not believe that every military intervention is synonymous with nation building or the Iraq War or the Afghanistan War. I mean, I think that if we look at how Venezuela is playing out, it's a very interesting situation because you have you have a government that has not been dissolved, rightfully so, because that would have led to chaos, and who knows what would have been the result of that. But you have to essentially walk this fine line, which is why I come back to peace through strength. You have to carry a big stick, and you have to make two things happen with this government in Venezuela.
Hold that point. I got to thank you. I got to thank Michael. I got to thank Sam. But it's always good when you can elevate our thinking, our knowledge, and make us think deeply. And we appreciate that. I'm Armstrong Williams. Enjoy your weekend in the NFL playoffs.